My sister excluded my son and me from dinner. You should have called ahead, her husband said, smirking. A short time later, we were enjoying a VIP meal while they watched with clear irritation. If I had to describe my relationship with my sister in a single sentence, it would be this. She's the kind of person who smiles warmly while quietly pulling the chair out from under you, then convinces everyone it was your fault for falling. My name is Daniel. I'm 40 years old, and I've never been confrontational. I'm the type who lets things go, who chooses his battles so carefully that people assume I don't have any fight in me at all. But I remember everything, every subtle insult, every passive remark, and every time I was told not to overreact when I knew I hadn't. My sister Megan is 43. She's the image of a perfect suburban mom. Bright smile, coordinated holiday pajamas, and a polished social media presence that looks straight out of a home decor catalog. Behind that image, though, she's clever, calculated, and frankly, inconsiderate when no one is watching. Family gatherings tend to bring out the worst in her. Or maybe they just reveal who she really is. Growing up, Megan was the ideal child. Straight-A student, head cheerleader, prom queen. I was the quiet younger brother who preferred art to sports and books to arguments. Our parents never said it out loud, but favoritism was woven into everything. When Megan got into a minor car accident, everyone worried. When I scraped someone's bumper in college, I was labeled reckless. Her mistakes were excusable. Mine were character flaws. I didn't fully understand how deep that pattern ran until after our father passed away. He was rough around the edges, but always kept the peace. Once he was gone, the balance disappeared. Every dinner became a quiet contest. Every invitation came with conditions. And just when things seemed calm, Megan would do something small but deliberate to remind me of my place. I tolerated it. I always have, especially for my son, Ethan. Ethan is 13 now, and he means everything to me. He's smart, kind, and genuinely thoughtful. His mother and I separated amicably 6 years ago, and I've had full custody since she moved overseas for work. I never expected single parenting to come naturally, but it did, largely because Ethan makes it easy. He holds doors open, says please without being reminded, and writes thank you notes after birthdays without being asked. I know how fortunate I am. A few months ago, Megan invited us to a downtown restaurant to celebrate her twin's birthday. Nothing fancy, she said. Just dress appropriately. There's a dress code. That should have been my first clue. Megan doesn't do understated. I assumed she chose the place to impress her friends, but it was her kid's birthday, and Ethan liked spending time with his cousins, so I agreed. I bought Ethan a new button-down and picked out a dress shirt for myself. I didn't want to arrive and feel quietly judged. Traffic was heavy that day, and we arrived about 6 minutes late. I apologized as we entered. The hostess smiled and guided us toward a glass-walled private dining area, softly lit with elegant fixtures. The servers wore tuxedo vests. Ethan's eyes lit up. "This place is amazing," he whispered. "Can I get steak?" I told him he could order whatever he wanted. As we approached the table, I noticed Megan and her husband John seated with their twins and another couple I didn't recognize. 9 chairs were arranged neatly, but only 4 were occupied. Place cards sat at each setting. I slowed down when I realized mine wasn't there. Megan looked up with practiced surprise. "Oh, Daniel," she said, "I thought I told you we only reserved for 9. I told her I didn't realize an RSVP was required. She confirmed she had invited us, but explained, sweetly, that the private room had limited seating and was now full. She gestured vaguely at the table. No extra chairs appeared. No effort was made to adjust anything. Ethan stood behind me, smiling politely in that way kids do when they sense something is wrong but don't want to cause trouble. John leaned back, sipping his wine. "You really should have called ahead," he said. I felt my face warm, but kept my voice steady. I nodded, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, and guided him away. The hostess noticed and asked if we needed help. I briefly explained and asked if there was any other seating available, preferably somewhere quiet. She paused, then said she'd check with the manager. That's when I met Steve. Steve was likely in his late 60s, with silver hair and a calm presence that made it clear he was in charge. I explained the situation plainly, without emotion. He listened, nodded once, and said, "Give me 6 minutes." 12 minutes later, Ethan and I were seated in a beautiful booth on the other side of the restaurant. Leather seats, a view of the fireplace, and a server who treated us like honored guests. I didn't know what Steve did, but it worked. I stayed calm. I didn't confront Megan or make a scene. But through the glass, I could see her watching. Each time she noticed us laughing or speaking with Steve, her expression tightened. Then the waiter returned and said, "Mr. Daniel, the manager wanted you to know everything has been arranged as discussed." He paused, confused. "What did you arrange?" I smiled. That's when I knew this wouldn't play out the way Megan expected. Ethan sipped his lemonade while Megan whispered something to John. He glanced over and laughed into his glass. One of the twins looked our way before being redirected. I smiled and waved casually, as if nothing were wrong. Steve checked in again. "Everything good here?" he asked. "Perfect," I replied. "Better than expected." Ethan asked if he could order steak and mac and cheese. I told him yes, we were celebrating. When he asked what we were celebrating, I simply smiled. This could have been brushed aside, but something had shifted. Megan didn't just humiliate me. She did it in front of my son, and that mattered. Dinner was excellent. Ethan ordered freely. The server kept everything flowing smoothly. Steve later mentioned he had something special planned for dessert. Megan's table remained visible in the glass reflection, and she kept glancing over, clearly curious. The moment came when a large dessert was brought to her table. Brownies, fudge, sparklers, music, the whole production. The restaurant's attention shifted to her. Ethan smiled and said it looked cool. Megan raised her glass toward us and mouthed, "You missed out." That's when it clicked. None of this was accidental. The seating, the private room, the display. It was deliberate. She never intended for us to join. It was about appearances, control, exclusion wrapped in politeness. Steve returned as they finished. I thanked him and casually asked if they did custom desserts. Then I leaned in slightly and gestured toward Megan's table. How difficult would it be to make another one of those? "Bigger," I said. Steve tilted his head. "Bigger. Same foundation, but triple the size. Make it noticeable." I told him I would cover the cost. He gave a knowing smile. "I'll see what I can do." With that, the plan was in motion. I assumed that would be the end of it. A modest conclusion, a quiet counterbalance delivered politely. I didn't need to be vindictive. I didn't want attention or conflict. I only wanted Megan to experience, briefly, what she had put us through. Then something happened that shifted the entire night. Ethan excused himself to use the restroom. I was scrolling through my phone when a shadow stopped beside our table. I looked up to see John standing there, wine glass in hand, his familiar smirk in place. "Didn't expect to see you over here," he said. I blinked. "You mean after you said there weren't seats for us?" He laughed as if it were all harmless. "It's not that serious. You know how Megan is with planning. She has her system. It's just numbers." He went on, suggesting I could have asked for a chair, insisting no one meant to exclude us. I reminded him that he'd told me I should have called ahead. He shrugged. "Well, yeah, if you really wanted to sit with us, you would have confirmed, right?" I held my tongue. Ethan returned and paused when he saw John. "Hi, Uncle John." John nodded, then leaned closer to me and lowered his voice. He said Megan didn't like disorder, that Ethan and I were unpredictable. Not in a bad way, he clarified, just outside her routine. He suggested I check in next time before showing up. That phrase, check in, hit harder than it should have, like we needed permission to exist in the family space. I stood slowly and thanked him for stopping by, noting that our dessert was on the way. He returned to his table. Megan leaned toward him. He whispered something. She laughed. That was the moment something finally snapped. Not loudly, but completely. It wasn't about dinner. It wasn't about seating. It was years of being overlooked. The last-minute gifts. Ethan's name missing from cards. The beach house invitation extended to everyone but us. Brushed off as logistics. I remembered all of it, and this time I wasn't going to absorb it quietly. The waiter returned, pushing a trolley so large it took 2 staff members to guide it. On top sat a towering 3-tier dessert. Lava cake, stacked brownies, ice cream, chocolate shards, caramel, strawberries dusted with real gold flakes, and a fondant plaque that read, "To the best dad and the coolest kid." The room reacted instantly. People stared. Phones came out. Applause followed as sparklers were lit around the base. Across the room, Megan froze. Steve appeared beside me and rested a hand on my shoulder. "Enjoy," he said. "It's on the house." I stared at him. He smiled and explained that my story stuck with him, and he appreciated seeing someone put their child first. He called it a manager's privilege. Ethan was already laughing, chocolate on his cheek. "Dad, this is amazing!" I laughed with him, grateful and stunned. Megan didn't approach us. I could see the tension in her posture, the loss of control settling in. The real surprise came later, when the bill arrived. Not to our table, but to hers. Megan didn't know, and neither did her guests, that private dining bookings on Friday nights required a minimum spend of $3,500. If the amount wasn't reached, the charge still applied. Someone at her table had ordered lightly, but it didn't matter. The manager was already explaining. The look Megan gave me from across the room said everything. When we left, Ethan was still energized, holding a gold-dusted strawberry like a trophy, replaying every detail of the dessert. I smiled and listened, but my thoughts were elsewhere. The adrenaline faded, replaced by that hollow feeling that follows standing up for yourself. I wondered if I had gone too far. Ethan fell asleep on the ride home, still mumbling about cake. I felt drained, not guilty, just worn out. The night hadn't fixed anything. It didn't change how my family saw me. If anything, it might have reinforced their assumptions, that I overreact, that I'm emotional, that I cause scenes. I didn't regret giving Ethan a great memory, but I questioned whether it came from care or retaliation. Megan didn't reach out afterward. No message, no acknowledgement. My mother eventually called, saying she heard things were awkward. I explained what happened. She sighed and defended Megan's effort and stress, suggesting I could have communicated better. The blame shifted, as it always did. That's when I realized the real issue. I kept waiting for understanding that was never coming. I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit their comfort, excusing behavior, minimizing my feelings. And I didn't want Ethan learning that love meant tolerating disrespect. So I stopped engaging. I didn't respond to group messages centered on Megan. I didn't send gifts. I didn't explain or justify anything. I stepped back, and in that quiet, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. I stopped replaying conversations. I had space again, and in that space, I finally began focusing on myself, on the parts of me I'd neglected for years. I had always been creative, sketching, painting, making things. But I had kept that part of myself hidden for years, focusing on keeping Ethan's life stable after the divorce. The job paid the bills, but it never fulfilled me. One evening, after Ethan had gone to sleep, I pulled my old sketch pad from the back of the closet and started drawing. It felt awkward at first, like returning to a language I hadn't used in years. Then instinct took over. A sketch turned into a drawing. A drawing became a full illustration. One night, I posted a few pieces anonymously on a Reddit art forum just to get feedback. The response surprised me. People liked my work, really liked it. There were comments, compliments, questions, and even a few requests for commissions. Making money from it hadn't crossed my mind, but suddenly it felt possible. I started spending 2 hours each night drawing after Ethan went to bed. No pressure, no chasing results, just creating. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, and Ethan noticed. One morning at breakfast, he said, "You've been in a better mood lately." I asked if he really thought so. He nodded and said I didn't seem tired anymore. I smiled and told him I'd started drawing again. He thought that was cool and asked if I could teach him. That moment meant more to me than anything Megan could have said. Things improved from there. I launched an Instagram art page and took on small projects, logos, pet portraits, even a book cover for an indie author. It wasn't a major income, but it was something of my own. Ethan and I began having art nights every Friday. We played music, grabbed snacks, and drew together. Sometimes he copied my style. Other times, he created strange, abstract pieces I never would have imagined. I could see his confidence growing, just as mine had. As weeks passed, the resentment faded. I didn't want payback. I didn't want Megan to suffer. I just wanted to heal. Family, however, doesn't always allow distance. It started with a birthday invitation. Not Ethan's, mine. Megan's handwritten card arrived in the mail. Joint birthday dinner for Mom and Daniel. Family only. Dress nicely. RSVP. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a carefully worded invitation, as if nothing had happened. Same restaurant, same private room, same Friday night. I almost threw it away, but I knew Megan well enough to understand this wasn't reconciliation. It was a reset, an attempt to regain control and rewrite the narrative on her terms. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't going back to stay quiet. The card sat on my desk for 4 days, not because I was undecided. I already knew I would go, just not as the version of Daniel they expected. Not the agreeable brother who smiled and stayed silent. That version was gone. This dinner wasn't about birthdays. It was a test. Megan chose the venue. She extended the invitation, but not warmly. It was calculated. See, I can include you if you cooperate. This time, I wasn't playing along. The first call I made was to Steve, the restaurant manager. I didn't expect him to remember me. But when I mentioned the 3-tier dessert, he laughed. He said the pastry chef still talked about it and that it had been the most fun she'd had in years. I explained the situation plainly, the invitation, the setup, and how Megan operated. I didn't exaggerate. I just told the truth. He understood immediately. Private room again, he said. Limited seating, carefully planned. He checked the reservation. 12 seats, enough for immediate family, no more. Megan had positioned herself as the gatekeeper again. I told him I wanted to change the dynamic. Nothing disruptive, just enough to show I wasn't following her rules anymore. He asked if I wanted a separate table again. I said no. This time, I wanted a seat at that table. That was the beginning. Over the next 3 days, I put a plan in motion. Step 1. Bring someone Megan wouldn't expect. She had always made subtle remarks about my personal life, suggesting I was too busy, too single, or too absorbed in my doodles. I usually ignored it. This time, I didn't. I'd been seeing Samantha for about a month. We met through an online art community. She was a graphic designer in another city, thoughtful, sharp, and quietly confident. We'd only been on a few dates, but we connected easily. I asked her if she'd be willing to attend a family dinner with me. I explained the history. After a pause, she said yes, just like that. Step 2, dress with intention. Not flashy, confident. I chose a fitted blue jacket I hadn't worn in years, a clean white shirt, dark jeans, and boots that felt understated but deliberate. Ethan wore a charcoal button-down with chinos. Samantha looked effortlessly polished, in burgundy, a contrast that didn't try to compete but didn't fade either. Step 3. Control the narrative before Megan could. On the morning of the dinner, I posted a photo on my art Instagram, Ethan and me drawing in the park. The caption read, "1 year ago, I was stuck in a place that drained me. Tonight, I'm celebrating not just my birthday, but the quiet changes that gave me my life back." The post gained more attention than I expected. Supportive comments poured in. Megan liked it within an hour, but said nothing. Step 4. Arrive last. Megan always liked making entrances. This time, I let her have it. I asked Steve if someone could escort us in if we arrived a few minutes late. He agreed. We arrived 9 minutes late. A well-dressed hostess greeted us and led us down the familiar hallway. I could hear the conversation inside the private dining room before the door even opened. Megan's laughter was loud and performative. John interrupted with one of his predictable stories. My mother asked questions no one answered. When the door finally opened, everything stopped. Heads turned. Megan froze mid-sentence. Her eyes moved from me to Samantha, then to Ethan. She smiled quickly, too tight to feel genuine. "Oh, Daniel," she said, "you're here. We were starting to worry. I texted you." "We were just running a little late," I replied calmly, resting my hand on Samantha's back as we walked in. Traffic was rough. Her smile faltered as she looked at Samantha. "This is Samantha," I said. "A friend. She's a designer." Samantha extended her hand politely. "Thank you for having me." Megan took it and released it almost immediately. "Well, we weren't really planning for +1s. That's lucky," I said evenly, glancing at the table. "The reservation's for 12. There were 12 seats arranged. Everyone was filled. Megan had no opening. Samantha and I sat together, Ethan beside us. My mother stood across the table, clearly caught off guard. John raised his glass with little enthusiasm, announcing that the birthday guest had finally arrived. Megan regrouped quickly. She shifted the conversation to neutral ground: John's recent work trip, the twins' activities, light topics meant to regain control. Then came the comment. "We thought Daniel was keeping us in suspense," she said with a smile. Classic artistic temperament. I smiled back. I do like an entrance. Must run in the family. John laughed. My mother focused on her menu. The tension remained. Samantha handled the situation with ease. She asked thoughtful questions, complimented the twins, laughed when appropriate. She didn't overshare or try to impress. She wasn't competing, and that unsettled Megan more than anything obvious ever could. By the time appetizers arrived, Megan's composure had started to slip. She took a sip of wine and said, "Daniel's always been the mysterious one, the artist. We never really know what he's working on, do we?" I set my fork down. "Actually, I've been illustrating a children's book. It was picked up by a publisher last month." The table went quiet. My mother looked up. "Really?" I nodded. "Yes, it's about a child finding strength in being different. Ethan inspired it." Samantha squeezed my hand. My mother smiled, clearly surprised. "That's wonderful." Megan recovered quickly. "Well, that's sweet," she said. "Daniel's always had a strong imagination. Nice to see it put to use." Ethan spoke up before I could respond. "He also has more than 35 commissions, and his art was featured in an online magazine." I hadn't prompted him. Hearing the pride in his voice caught me off guard. Megan blinked. "Well, I suppose everyone's been busy." I smiled. "Some more than others." The dynamic shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just decisively. I wasn't playing a background role anymore. I didn't need to. Conversation continued, stiff and measured. By the time dessert approached, Megan's warmth had cooled. She watched me closely, waiting for a mistake. I gave her none. I stayed quiet, not out of hesitation, but because silence was doing more than words ever could. When the dessert menu arrived, Megan straightened. "Should we do a shared dessert again?" she asked, looking around the table. My mother nodded. John shrugged. The twins barely reacted. Megan turned to me. "What do you think, Daniel?" I took a sip of coffee. "I've already arranged something." She blinked. "You did?" "I spoke with Steve last week," I said. "He has something prepared." Before she could respond, the lights dimmed slightly. A cart rolled in, guided by two servers, followed by another carrying sparkling glasses. The dessert was larger than expected, not a replica of the twins' cake, but a refined version. White chocolate mousse stacked high, caramel pastries layered carefully, dark chocolate accents spreading outward. Gold-dusted raspberries caught the light. On top, a thin chocolate plaque read, "To Daniel, for rising quietly but powerfully." There were audible reactions around the room. Even John leaned forward. Ethan stared in amazement. Samantha smiled. Megan froze. I stood and thanked the servers, then addressed the table. "I hope this is okay. I just wanted to mark the moment." Megan laughed lightly. "It's certainly something," she said. "Don't you think it's a bit much? This was meant to be a shared dinner." I nodded. "You're right. But for years, every family dinner has been about someone else. Promotions, performances, perfection. I've always applauded quietly. Tonight, I wanted to do something different, not out of resentment, just to remind myself that it's okay to be seen, and to show Ethan that kindness doesn't mean disappearing." She hesitated, deciding to push back. "I didn't give her the chance. One more thing. I added, reaching into my jacket and placing an envelope in front of my mother. This came from Dad's lawyer. Megan stiffened. What are you talking about? My mother opened it and read. Her expression changed. I explained calmly that Dad had set up a trust with specific conditions. He had noticed the imbalance and wanted to address it. I told them I held controlling interest in the family cabin, the one Megan had been renting out. John straightened in his chair. Megan went pale. She has usage rights, I continued, but not ownership. And the trust allows restructuring if exclusionary behavior occurs, especially involving children. Megan accused me of bluffing. I told her to call the lawyer. She read the papers in silence. I don't want the cabin, I said. I don't want attention or control. I just won't allow my son to be treated as less. No one spoke. I explained that I'd be taking over the lease and removing it from short-term rental use. Ethan and we'd spend time there this summer, just us. Going forward, I said, I would decide which gatherings to attend. Invitations would need to be sincere. Otherwise, I was fine with distance. I looked at my mother. No hard feelings. I just won't keep showing up to disappear. She nodded quietly. Samantha placed a hand on my back. Ethan looked at me, wide-eyed. I smiled, genuinely. Thank you for dinner. We left as dessert was being served. Behind us, the room remained silent. That was the last family dinner I attended for a long time. But it was the first time I felt free. Not just from Megan, but from the need to explain myself at all.